Well, today is all about answering this question: who is the greatest of all time? Who is the greatest of all time? And it is no secret that I'm a pretty big sports fan. And so this question often gets asked and it gets abbreviated to the word GOAT. So if you're a little bit older and you've wondered, why do people always refer to or ask the question, who's the GOAT? It's greatest of all time, G-O-A-T, greatest of all time. Who's the GOAT? And oftentimes in sports, this gets asked quite a bit. And if I were to ask you, who is the GOAT of the Minnesota Twins, right? Well, for me growing up, it certainly was Kirby Puckett, right? I can remember number 34 in the Metrodome reverberating, Kirby Puckett. I just love that. He was the GOAT back in the 80s and 90s. He was the man. You might ask about football. Who's the greatest of all time? Some would say Tom Brady. How can you argue with all of the championship rings that he has won? You might ask, when it comes to hot dog eating, is there anyone else but Joey Chestnut? He is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. And we actually have an action shot that I thought you would enjoy. There it is right there. Yep, that's great. I knew you'd like that. Or what about a humanitarian? Who's the GOAT, right? Obviously we think of Martin Luther King Jr. and all of the ways that he helped us progress. Maybe it was Mother Teresa in the slums of Calcutta, India, how she devoted her life to the poorest of the poor. Maybe think of inventors. Who's the greatest of all time? You might say Albert Einstein, of course. He might be one of the greatest inventors. But we're talking about inventors. One of my favorites is Vernon Rudolph, who I know you all know. We all know Vernon, right? You guys, only one person knows who Vernon Rudolph is? Well, next picture. Yeah, he invented the Krispy Kremes, you know what I'm saying? Greatest inventor of all time, that's what I'm saying. Who needs a light bulb when you've got Krispy Kremes, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, Vernon Rudolph, thank you, Rudolph. Well, today we're gonna talk about who is the greatest in this room. Ooh. Or maybe watching online, right? Turn to the person next to you and say, do you think it's you? Just ask them, do you think it's you? The greatest of all time in this room. So let's start with Jesus. Obviously, he's the GOAT, greatest of all time. But the question is, how did he become the greatest? How did he become the greatest? That is a very good question. And we get this answer and we learn this lesson from two of his disciples who were wanting something from Jesus, but they wanted him to say yes to the question before they even told him what it was. Right? Have you ever had this? Have your kids ever done this to you? And they've said, Mom and Dad, we want you to say yes to this, but we can't tell you what it is until you say yes, right? And all the parents are like, I don't think so, right? Every parent has experienced that. And this was exactly what happened with Jesus and James and John. We're picking this up in Mark chapter 10, verse 35. And it says, then James and John, two of his disciples, the son of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask, all right? Jesus, we have something big we need to ask you, but we can't tell you what it is. We just need you to nod your head and say yes. And I can just almost feel their nervous excitement as they're ready to bring this question to Jesus. But Jesus responds the same way that every single parent responds. He asks the question in verse 36, what do you want me to do, right? I'm not agreeing to anything until I know what it is. What do you want me to do, he asked. And they replied, something pretty simple, Jesus. Actually, we're just wondering if you would let one of us sit at your right hand and the other one on your left in glory, right? If we could be like number one and number two, we know that we're your favorites, Jesus, right? Just give us a wink and nod if you know that's true, right? You don't have to say it for everyone to hear, but we know that we are your favorites, and in glory, in heaven one day, we want to sit on your right and on your left. And you can decide who's who, God, but we just want to be on your right and left. And I can just see Jesus kind of smirking a bit and just shaking his head, thinking to himself, these guys are a bunch of idiots. They still do not get what I've been trying to tell them. They still don't get it. Even after all this time that we've been together, all this time I've been modeling this for them, they still don't get it. And so Jesus responds to their audacious question with this in verse 38. Jesus says, you don't know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said, you will drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. Jesus is saying, come on, guys. I know you want to be on my right and left, and you want the glamour of it all, but can you really drink what I'm about to drink? Can you really walk through what I'm about to walk through? I mean, he was speaking of his death. Are you really willing to give up your life for this thing? Would you be willing to hang on a cross? Would you be willing to do what I'm about to do? And without even understanding really what Jesus is talking about, they just are like, yes, we're in, of course, we'll do it. We just want to sit on your right and left. But what they didn't know is that the 10 other disciples kind of overheard this conversation. Now, what would you be thinking and feeling if you were one of the other 10? Well, it tells us what happens. Verse 41. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and with John, right? They were ticked off. They were upset at James and John. Like, how dare you pull Jesus aside and try to take the best spots in heaven, right? How dare you take it from us? I want to be on the right. I want to be on the left. And here they are. They're arguing about this. They thought they were a bunch of suck-ups, right? That they were just after the best spots. And Jesus sees this commotion. He sees what they're going through, and he notices that it's an opportunity to bring them all together to explain what it means to be the greatest. Jesus is about to explain how you become the GOAT, the greatest of all time. In verse 42, Jesus called them together and said, guys, let me explain this to you. You know those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, how they lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them? He goes, I want you to picture, right? Picture the rulers, the leaders that we have over us. You know how they act like the rulers, how they're in charge, they're always fighting to get to the top, how selfish they can be. They want other people to do stuff for them, right? How they think that this is the path to greatness. And Jesus utters 4 words that should grab every one of our attention. In verse 43, Jesus says, not so with you. Not so with you. You know how the other leaders, they want to make it about themselves? No. Not so with you. Not if you're following me. If you're going to be a follower of mine, this whole idea of greatness is a totally different picture. Not so with you. In fact, that's your first fill-in on your notes. Not so with you. And he continues, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must become your, what's that word? Servant. Whoever's going to be great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. And as you can imagine, this stopped them dead in their tracks. Thinking to themselves, wait, hold on, time out, God. In order for us to be the greatest, we have to be the last. In order to be the greatest, you want us to serve other people? Like, Jesus, I don't know if you've listened to any podcasts lately on leadership, but it usually is not about being a servant to other people. And then Jesus, because knowing their thoughts, knowing they're human, knowing they're going through all the same emotions that we all do when we hear that if we want to be the greatest, we need to be the servants. Jesus puts an exclamation point on this whole thought when he says this in verse 45, for even the Son of Man, me, did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. In other words, if anyone could lord it over people, it would be me. If anyone could make other people do it for me, it would be me. If anyone has the right to say, I'm the ruler, I'm the one in charge, I'm going to be selfish, everybody do it all for me, it would be me. And Jesus says, not even the Son of God was willing to take that place. Instead, he took on the form of a servant and even laid down his life as a ransom for many. And so your next fill-in is this, that the greatest person is the servant. The greatest person is the servant. Now, if you're not a follower of Jesus, this doesn't apply to you. You can skip right over this. But for those who have made a decision similar to Charlie's, who said, yes, I'm going to follow Jesus, he is leading us into a place and a path to greatness that everyone who follows him should enter into. And it's into this area of serving. And so I want to ask you this question if you're a follower of Jesus. As a follower of Jesus, how are you doing with serving? In fact, if you have someone sitting next to you, I just want you to ask them right now, how are we doing on serving? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Just go ahead and ask them, how are we doing on serving? Online, you're not off the hook. If you're online, ask in your living room, how are we doing on serving? Hey, now how are we doing, right? Because, this is really important. This is really important to Jesus. And here's what I know, that once upon a time, there was a chair in this room with your name on it. You go fill in the blank. There's a chair with your name on it. You didn't know it. The chair didn't know it. We didn't know it, but your name was on the chair. And you may not even have liked the idea of church. Maybe it was the furthest thing from your mind, but someone invited you or begged you or bribed you, and you finally relented and said, okay, I'll go with you to church. And you came, and the parking lot seemed really big, and you were already prepping yourself for why you weren't going to enjoy this experience, why you weren't going to like church. But then when you came in and you saw people that were smiling and friendly, and they looked happy to be here, all that seemed very strange to you. And then things seems organized, right? As you walk through the building, you go, wow, this seems organized, and that seems strange to you too, right? Wow, the church is organized, right? And then you started eating some free donuts and coffee, and that seemed delicious and strange to you, because why in the world are they giving that stuff away for free? And then you came to a service, which was also strange. You walked into this room, and it was strange to you because no one was wearing a robe or a hat, and the music was kind of loud, and the lights were bright, and during the music, everybody was singing. And there was that one guy that had a question the whole time because his hand was up during the music, and you didn't understand what that was about, but you just kind of moved on and you got past that. And then if you were a guy sitting in the room, you were wondering, how long is this going to take? And then someone got up here and said, hey, we're going to be here for a little over an hour. And that's when you knew for sure we were a cult, because we were reading your mind. You're like, how in the world did they know? I was wondering how long this was going to take. And you left. And truth be told, you actually enjoyed it. You got something out of it. Or maybe you brought your kids, and you were a little nervous at first to put your kids down into the kids' room. But then when you saw how fun the environment looked and how caring the people looked, then you were wondering, do you have an all-day option where I could just leave them for the day, come back tonight and pick them up? Because that would free me up for a little bit. That would be great. And then you picked up your kids, and they had fun. And then they started begging you, can we go back to the donut church? Can we go back to the donut church? And even though you thought, there goes my Sunday mornings, you kept coming. Because something began happening in your life. And the truth is, you're still here. And then you did something you never thought you'd do. You invited someone to church. Right? Maybe it was on accident. Maybe they were like staying at your house for the weekend, and you're like, do you want to go to church with us? But eventually you brought someone to church. And you realize now that you are now viewing it not through your own eyes, you were viewing it through their eyes, and you were hoping that everything would be perfect on that day. And then maybe after getting a few small group catalogs, you decided to jump in and try a group. And you took the relational risk. And you showed up and you found people who became new friends in your life that are taking the journey with you. And now you're like a regular attendee, like you've been coming. You've been showing up, you've been taking in the kids' ministry, the donuts, the friendships, the messages, the music, and you've been growing in your faith. And if you were to ask yourself 5 years ago, if you would now be where you are on your faith journey, what would you have said? Right? Some of you would have said, if I said 5 years ago, would you have thought that you'd be where you are in your faith journey? You would have said, absolutely not. Not a chance in the world. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier this week. His name is Eric, and him and his wife started coming 6 years ago. And they didn't go anywhere to church. And his wife was saying, come on, let's try out some churches. Let's try out some churches. She's like, nope, church isn't for me. We're not doing that. And then she got the flyer in the mail for Riverway, and she said, this place looks cool. We need to check it out. And he said, nope, I'm not going. You can go if you want. And so she came by herself. And she came for a Sunday, and she experienced what many of you experienced, that she didn't die. Like it was an actually enjoyable experience. And she went home, and she said, Eric, we've got to go. I promise you that you'll like it. And Eric didn't know it, and we didn't know it. But his name was on a chair. And he showed up and he started taking it in, and God began to work in his life and eventually led him to a point where he put his faith in Jesus. He started serving and being involved. And now 6 years later, Eric is one of our key volunteers up in that booth that helps run all of our videos so everybody online can watch. And I asked him today, could you have ever imagined 6 years ago that you'd be where you're at in your faith right now? He said, absolutely not. I could have never imagined it. And so for some of you, you're in that camp. You've given this faith thing a try, and now it's been working, right? And now you're coming, you're attending. There's others of you that showed up, and this was not the case. You came in knowing all about church, and you were ready to roll, right? You grew up as kids going to church. Your parents went to church. Your grandparents went to church. And you came in already knowing all about Hillsong, KTIS, and Awana, right? You were ready to roll. You're like, we're going to be a regular attender. That's just what we do. It's Sunday, and so we go to church. So whether you're a part of the former group or the latter group, I'm going to ask everybody in this room for your help. Watching online, no out for you today. I'm asking you for your help. For every single one of us, we need your help. Because there's a husband in this community who is begging their wife to give church a try. There is a wife who is praying that her husband will finally agree to show up. Give it a shot. There are parents that are praying for their adult children who live in the area that they will start coming to church. There are parents of teenagers who are praying that their teenager will show up on a Wednesday night, and here's what I know, they're coming to your church. They're coming to your church. And for some of them, they're going to give it one shot, just like you were going to give us one shot. We don't know who they are. And just like we didn't know who you were before you came, but we do know when they will come. They will come next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that. You see your next fill-in. We need your help so that someone else can find their chair. We need your help so that someone else can find their chair, so that their kids can find their chair, so their teenagers can find their chair. Because they aren't here yet, but they are coming. And so in the last few minutes that we have together, I'm going to do my very best to persuade you to do one thing, and it's your next fill-in. I'm going to ask you to provide for others what others have provided for you by serving at Riverway. I'm going to ask you to provide for others what others have provided for you by serving at Riverway. Because here's the truth. When we first started Riverway 10 and a half years ago, we didn't have 2 dimes, 2 people, or 2 sticks to rub together. But as people came, all of those early people started serving somewhere at church, and it created an environment for you to find your chair. I can remember one Sunday early on, like first couple weeks, where we had more volunteers in the kids' rooms and in the lobby than we did actually in the people in the service. That's how low everything was. But we were ready, right? We're saying we're ready for people to find their chair. But now that we've grown, now that online has become an option, it's become easier to lean in and lean on the core of people who already are serving and simply just attend. You can easily show up, eat the donuts, take in the service, do the kids' ministry, and you can leave. And if you want to do that, you can. But let me ask you this question. What if that had been the attitude of the people early on who decided to serve? The answer is you wouldn't be here today. You most likely would not be here today. You would have never found your chair. But because people decided to live for something bigger than themselves and give of their time and serve, that you're here. And not only that, but those people, if they had decided not to serve, would have missed out on the lifelong friendships you make when you serve alongside other people. They would have missed out on the blessings of God over their life for the way they're helping to build his kingdom. And I got to tell you, here at Riverway, it has never been about us four no more. It never has been, and it never will be. This is about fulfilling God's purpose here on earth, as it says in 1 Peter 4:10. And it reads this way, that each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. All right, think of this. This is the challenge, that every one of us would use our gifts in various forms to serve other people, and this is how we respond to the grace of God in our lives. This is how we respond to him saving us and forgiving us and knowing us and walking with us. We respond by opening up the opportunity for someone else to experience the same thing. That's how we do it. You respond to God's grace by serving others. And this is your next fill-in. Serving others is where your life and my life count for eternity. Right? These are the efforts that we put into building God's kingdom, not just our own kingdom. And I got to tell you, this is why Jesus said, the greatest among you will be the servant. Now, why in this moment was Jesus pulling his disciples together yet again to try to get this point across? Because he was trying to get us and them into an eternal mindset. Why is this important? Why do we need an eternal mindset? Because our culture every single day is trying so hard to tell us that our lives should just be about us. Our time, our comfort, our stuff, our freedom, our way. And this culture is becoming increasingly more and more self-centered. And Jesus says, not so with you. Not so with you. If you're going to be a follower of mine, then you will respond to the grace of God by serving those around you. So Jesus, he's getting us into this eternal mindset that what we do here matters for eternity. When you help serve and someone else finds their chair, it matters for eternity. It matters. And so here's what I'm asking you to do. And this is your next fill-in. To become the greatest in the room by serving. Everybody online watching, I'm asking you this one thing. I'm asking you to be the greatest of all the people watching online because you're going to serve. I'm asking you to be the GOAT, the greatest, because you've decided to serve. I want to challenge you to let your life be about something bigger than yourself, to be engaged with eternal things. Can I tell you, as your pastor, you need this in your life. You need to be someone who spends part of their life serving others and building God's kingdom. I'm just telling you, you need it. And you know else who needs it? Your kids need it. Your kids need to see you building the kingdom of God. Your kids need to see you investing in the local church. My two greatest desires for my kids is that they would love God and love the local church. And I can promise you it won't happen if they don't see me engaged in it. That's what I want for them. Your peers need to see it. So I'm asking you, just like for Charlie, right? Leaders were there to give her a seat at youth group. This isn't just about us. This isn't about you. This is about the next generation. So I'm asking every one of us in this room, your next fill-in, to provide for the next generation what you wish the previous generation had provided for you. I'm asking you to provide for this generation, this next generation, what you wish the previous generation had provided for you. I got to tell you, if I had $1 for every time I heard someone say, if only I had heard all this when I was younger, if only I had a church like this when I was a teenager, if only I had a church like this when I was a young adult. And we have that opportunity to pass this along, to make it available for the next generation. And so if you are not serving in one of our ministry teams, I am asking everyone to pick a spot. Every one of us in this room, there are no outs today. No outs. Even for you watching online, no outs today. I'm asking everyone to pick a spot because someone is waiting to find their chair and we have to be ready for them. And this is what I love. And God's so faithful. This is what I love, that the writer of Hebrews is speaking to those who are they've already made the choice that they're serving and working to build the kingdom of God. And this is what the writer says in Hebrews 6:10, that God is not unjust. He will not forget your work. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. Two amazing thoughts on this verse, and you can just keep it right on the screen. If God hasn't forgotten, it means that he's watching. He sees every time you serve, every time you get up early, every time you make a sacrifice. He sees it and he'll bless you for it. And then here's the second amazing thing as I read this verse, that this is actually how you show love to God. He says, I will not forget your work and the love you have shown me as you have helped my people and continue to help them. This is actually how we show love to God. And this is your last fill-in. Every time you serve others, you are showing your love for God. That is an amazing thought. That's an amazing thought. So here's my question. Will you be one of the greatest in his eyes by choosing to follow the way of Jesus and be a servant? God, it's not all about me. It's not all about my time. God, this is for you, right? Will you help other people find their chair?